Welcome to the Second Bite podcast, where we talk with top entrepreneurs and CEOs about creating valuable companies through creative transactions. Now, let's get started with the show.
Okay, welcome back to the Second Bite podcast. I have a wonderful guest today, Steve Pivnik from Binary Tree. Steve, super happy to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me on, Todd.
Hey, and just before we jump in, I do want to, as we always do, say thanks to our sponsor, the people at Trivest. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them. They're a private equity group down in Miami. They're always on the list of founder-friendly and family-friendly private equity firms. They've got a history over 40 years, I believe, of doing over 300 transactions. They work with companies as small as $1 million of EBITDA in their discovery fund, and then very traditional private equity group, both control and non-control investors. They're a really, really good supporter of guys just like you, Steve, that have founded a business and want to accelerate it or grow it. So to our good friends at Trivest, thank you for their continued sponsorship, and shout out to them. If you go to Trivest/Second Bite, they've got a bunch of information material there that you might find interesting as well. So Steve, let's jump in. And I guess we have to, so you built Binary Tree, you did a really successful transaction not too long ago, and we'll get into all of that as we go. But take me back kind of to the beginning. Tell me about how Binary Tree started and kind of who you serve and what you grew the business to.
Sure. I love talking about this story. So it started in 1993. We primarily started as a consulting services organization. And at the time, Lotus Notes was a very popular and a growing technology. And we hung our hat on that technology, and we built a reputation for ourselves as being a great, Lotus Notes consulting organization. Based on the reputation that we built for ourselves, and we started, by the way, in New York City. Our first office was on 80 Wall Street. Based on the reputation we built for ourselves in the Lotus Notes community, we were hired by a bank, which was right down the street, called JP Morgan. This is before the Chase acquisition, to build them a migration utility. They were running Microsoft Mail at the time, and they said, hey, you guys know Lotus Notes very well. Can you please write us a conversion utility so that we can migrate all of this content from Microsoft Mail over to Lotus Notes? So when employees walk in the morning, they have their contacts, their calendar, their inbox, etc. So at the time, we thought that was a pretty boring project because we were doing a lot of, much more fancier, much more sophisticated type of solutions for other large customers. But we being consultants, we did it anyway. So we wrote that solution, and then we publicized it in some of the chat rooms. And then Rockwell International approached us and said, hey, you just wrote this migration utility from Microsoft Mail to Lotus Notes. We're on GroupWise. Can you help us get from GroupWise to Lotus Notes? So we did that for them. Slowly but surely, these little solutions snowballed into an entire suite of products to help companies get off of whatever was popular in the 90s over to the Lotus Notes platform, which was at the time the only truly scalable enterprise email platform. So,
Steve, to interrupt there for a second, did you say to yourself, I'm going to create a big consulting firm and grow it and all like that? Or did you just want to work for yourself? You had some technical know-how and you just started solving problems?
Yeah, I mean, after several years of starting my career as a programmer, I just was bitten by the entrepreneurial bug, which is alive and well in my family, and I just started up shop, and we felt that consulting was the best way to build a business, and then a custom project snowballed into a product, which we then later scaled.
And you started the business yourself or with a partner?
I started it with several partners at the time. It was almost like a dorm room project. We said, hey, we were all working on a project at a bank, and we looked around at each other, and it was my idea. And I said, hey guys, you know what? We're here. We're doing this type of work. There's a company that's farming us out. Making margin on us. We can do this for ourselves. We can make a little bit more money. Really. Make customers happy if we delivered projects as a company versus as 7 individuals. So there was actually 7 at the beginning.
Wow. So that's an interesting group to manage, and I'm sure that has dynamics we can get into. But take me through then the kind of the evolution as you continue to put these products on the shelf. Did you kind of create a suite of offerings? Was there a bunch of competition at the time? How did you get, because the business grew really well, right? I mean, you grew to how many heads?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I'll fast forward to the very, very end. We grew to over 200 employees across 12 countries. So it was an incredible journey, and there was multiple, chapters in this journey. So like I said earlier, in the 90s, we were focused on the Lotus Note space. We built these great migration capabilities to help Lotus and later IBM, scale their platform. We really didn't, there was no competition in the beginning. The products were so successful and so in demand that IBM/Lotus, it was IBM already by the time, by 1998, they came to us and they said, because they were one of our biggest customers, they would actually buy our product and then give it to large enterprises to go migrate their email data. And they were buying from us a la carte. And it came to a point in time and they said, hey, you know what? We're either going to build our own and make it a feature of the product, or we can just license yours. So that was an incredible opportunity for us, which gave us overnight worldwide notoriety. At the time, back in the day, to remember, software came on these little round things called CDs.
Hey, let me ask you this, because a lot of guys think, the IBM is going to buy us, our biggest customer is going to buy us. Did you guys ever have that conversation? Is that really true? Does that ever happen? Did you guys think about that?
Yeah, that's a great question, because true. I mean, any entrepreneur or any owner of a small company, when they're approached by one of the big boys, that's the first thing that comes to mind is, oh my God, they love us, they want to buy us. It's happened to us with Microsoft, it's happened to us with Google, it's happened to us with IBM. At the end of the day, they really don't want. Obviously these companies buy other companies, but more importantly, they buy or license technology. So people said, man, you must have had like multiple exits. I consider some of these licensing events, because they were very, very large 7-figure deals. So I consider them, multiple exits of the same company. And these licensing deals, worked out really well for us, obviously financially, and also just from a notoriety perspective.
So to take us back then, when you, for example, did that deal with IBM, when they licensed your product, they just wrote you a big check and now they had exclusivity to that product that they could give out to their customers? How did that work?
Yeah, they wrote us a big check. They had exclusivity for 2 years, and they took our software, they took the binary tree CD, and they put it into the IBM Lotus Note CD box, and they shipped that worldwide to customers. So when customers received their Lotus Note CDs, the binary tree CD was in there.
Wow.
So even after the deal expired, and they were no longer allowed to send those CDs out with our software on it, customers continued to come to us for those capabilities.
They for the capabilities, but also for help with integration, migration, everything, I would assume, right?
Sure. Exactly. So the software is a software. I mean, it obviously provides great functionality, but it's definitely the complete package is when you complement it with support and professional services, which we continued to provide for many years to come.
How many license deals did you do? You mentioned a couple of the big boys. Did you do a bunch of those?
They came in multiple forms. We did one. Our first one was with IBM. We later did I'm not going to call it a licensing deal, but we had a partnership arrangement with Google, because obviously Google tried to play in the enterprise messaging space. We can debate for hours whether or not they're successful in the enterprise. And then we moved on to Microsoft, and obviously Microsoft is the 8,000-pound gorilla right now. And Binary Tree's life ended with partnering with Microsoft, and that was just a phenomenal relationship that we had with them.
And so you founded the company in '93?
Correct.
And so you ran the business for over 25 years, right? 26 or 27 years. Did you get to the point where you just said, wow, the world's changing too fast and I want to go do other things, let's sell it? Or did somebody knock on the door? What was in an episode just a little bit ago, I spoke to Ben Edson, who sold his company VeriQ, And he talked about realizing that I could only get this business to so far because it would just take so much more to turn it into something larger. And he talked a lot about how he thought about that probably for the 2 years prior to him actually starting a process. Did you go through a similar evolution like that mentally?
Yeah, there's actually a two-part answer. In 1999, somebody knocked on our door and wanted to acquire at the time. This was SaaS before it was called SaaS. The precursor to SaaS was ASP. One of the first ASPs raised a lot of money to go and acquire companies. They were going to focus on Lotus Notes for email, provide that in a SaaS model or as ASP model, and Lawson as an ERP system in a SaaS model. And they knocked on our door, and they really didn't care about the software. They cared about our professional services. So the first, after the IBM deal, which I consider the first exit, the second exit in Binary Tree was actually selling our entire consulting services division, which consisted of, I'm going to say, probably 60 to 70 people at that time to this ASP. And soon as second bite of the apple, with that specific deal, I was part of it, meaning I was obligated, to come over with the consulting staff that was acquired, and there was an earnout involved, and which I can talk to later. So in that instance, somebody came knocking on the door, and we took advantage of it. Had a really nice exit with an earnout, and then 2 years later, I came back to run Binary Tree again. So now we're in the 2001 timeframe. So fast forward.
Yeah, just to pause on that for a sec. So when they did the transaction, did they buy Steve Pivnik for 2 years and that was it? Or because you knew you were coming back, your heart was in software? Or did the buyer think once Steve gets a flavor for what it's like here, he's going to want to stay here for the rest of his life?
Well, I don't think anybody knew what was going to happen. Nobody could have predicted a dot-com collapse and the impact on the economy after that. So what they were buying was expertise. They bought a lot of really, really, really smart consultants. And obviously, when you're buying human capital like that, they kind of wanted the leader that was in charge of that human capital as well. And I was super excited to do it because I thought that my software company was going to be in good hands with the management team that I left it with, but that's a whole other story. So I went over, and I had at that time no expectation of coming back. I thought this was a brand new opportunity. This is the entire they're creating a new marketplace in terms of ASP. We're going to be pioneers here, and this is going to be a great run. So I had no anticipation of coming back.
Who was that buyer, Steve?
They were called Net Aspects, NETASPX. They've been acquired since, so that company is no longer around. But they were one of the first to raise money and build.
Give me a quick comment on this, because a lot of times, and you know this because you've read, and I know you consult with people on this now, but people always say, or they always get the advice that never count on your earnout. You only can count on what you get up front. We have the opposite results, I guess, with our clients in terms of the earnout. Did you get all of your earnout? Did it go like you expected?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, after that, I've read nothing but earnouts or lawsuits waiting to happen. I had a very positive experience. My earnout consisted of 2 parts: the first 6 months post acquisition, and then the next 6 months. So the good news, bad news there is the first 6 months, we killed it. We made like 120% of whatever that number was, because we were basically just following the momentum that we came into that business with.
Right.
The second half, not so much, for a couple of reasons. As myself and my team were slowly but surely getting integrated into a larger organization, you get a little bit less control, but I'm not going to blame it on the control. If I had to blame it on something, I'm going to blame it on the market, falling apart at the second half of 2000.
And was there anything that, in terms of that whole experience, selling a services business, sticking for 2 years, getting the earnout, was there anything in there that surprised you, or a lesson learned that you carried with you since then?
Nothing. What surprised me was, again, I was coming from a small little entrepreneurial company that I started by myself, and we can do anything. And all of a sudden, we're going from, at the time, I think, so it was, we were maybe at 100 employees, so 60 came over with me to Net Aspects. And all of a sudden there was structure, right? there
Reporting and budgets.
there was a management team, there was board meetings. There was like, no, we can't do that. That's not in the budget for this quarter. Like, whoa, like I've never heard the word, no, we can't do that. So that was a bit surprising, but what was a pleasant surprise was the amount of autonomy that they did give myself and the organization, because obviously there was an earnout involved. And I give them a lot of kudos for allowing me to do what I needed to do in order to make it. So again, made it in the first half. Second half was out of everybody's control.
So last question then for you, and we can move on. As it relates to the structure that you had just talked about, we get to talk to a lot of guys on this podcast. Some of them say that experience matured me as an executive, as an owner, as a CEO, and prepared me better for the future. Some people say I just chafed under this rigorous structure of, corporate bloat, and I hated it. How would you describe your experience, and was it important for you?
It was a game changer for me. I call that experience my MBA in a box. I dropped out of college to go to work, and I became a computer geek. And I'm like, why spend 4 years here when I could just start making money immediately? And I started making money as a COBOL programmer instead of going going to college. So the experience of working for a CEO and a management team that at the time just raised $75 million, which is a big raise in 1999, to go build this ASP. And I think I spent just about 2 years there. It was my MBA in the box. It was an incredible experience. I learned a ton, and I wouldn't have changed it for the world.
And so then now that experience is over. The world kind of for people that don't remember the history. The world fell apart during 2000, the dot-com bust, the whole thing. And you said to yourself, okay, I'm just going to go back to my roots. I've done a nice exit on the services side. We've done some licensing deals. I'm going to go back and just tell me about that.
Sure. So I came back to Binary Tree. It had gone through several issues. I'm not going to blame it on me not being there. I'm not going to take credit for that, but there were many issues that I came back to. So my baby was in bad shape. I got my baby into much better shape and kind of revived it. At the time, technology trends were changing as well. Microsoft started becoming a dominant player in the email space. So we quickly, pivoted, to use a popular term, to support the migration trend to the Microsoft platform. And so all these customers that we've been migrating to Lotus Notes over the years, since the mid 90s, started coming back to us and saying, hey, you've migrated us to Lotus Notes. Now we want to go to Microsoft. Can you get us there? So we had a lot of repeat business, which was awesome.
And so now you're back in the software business, but you're building out the services side as well.
Exactly. I mean, our software really was these types of projects, it's not necessarily evil. You can't do them with software alone. There's so much, planning and preparation and execution and timing and training that needs to happen, that these projects, can go off successfully without a services component. Now, some companies, for instance, a lot of companies that were highly acquisitive, they became certified and they became so good at running our software that they would do the projects by themselves because they're highly acquisitive. So every time they did an acquisition, they would just buy licenses and do the project themselves. Other customers, most customers don't change email platforms every single year. So this is a once in a 5 to 7 year event. It's highly complicated. It's very, very risky. The consequences of email going down are huge. So you want people that know how to do this, to do your project for you.
Yeah, and you built the IP that would allow you to do it faster and quicker. So you could either do it cheaper and pass the savings on to a customer, or for somebody that wasn't as price sensitive, there's more profit in it for you, and on from that standpoint.
Exactly. We did exactly what you just said. And by the way, I keep talking about email. We also built a whole bunch of additional capabilities, but it's probably above my pay grade to get into the technical detail of Active Directory migrations with and all that other stuff that we did. So I just use email as a general topic of what we did, but we did a whole bunch of other things around email as well.
So then you built the business kind of back to, maybe you could fill us in some of the numbers, right? A certain size, again, a head count. And then again, you did another transaction of binary tree. That was just a few years ago. Can you take me from, you've come back now, you built it. Where did you get it to size and offering wise? And first point, before we get into the specifics of it, what was the thought process in your head about why to do a transaction?
Sure. Yeah, just to put a little bit more color behind the numbers, I came back to binary tree. It was in bad shape. I had to pare it down just so we can continue to make payroll to 12 employees. We
and
were
this
doing
is 01, 02?
This is 02. Oh, 02. Oh, this is like right before, I'm sorry, shortly after 9/11.
Okay, so you're all the way down to a dozen employees.
Yeah, I had to pare down. I came back to a mess. Had to pare down to a dozen employees so we can make payroll, pay down a ton of debt, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And fast forward from there to the end of 2000 or September 2020, to over 200 employees, 12 countries. Sorry, I had a little hiccup there. Over 200 employees, 12 countries, over $40 million in revenue.
Wow. So let me just, quick thought jumped in my head. I think if you're a listener and you're like, wow, you just said bunch of debt all the way down to 12 employees, blah, blah, blah. Maybe a listener thinks, yeah, but he sold a business and he did a bunch of licensing deals. He's got a bunch of money anyways. That certainly is not stressful for a guy like that. You want to comment on that?
Incredibly stressful. I can't comment on what those licensing deals were nor what that transaction size was. I mean, it was great at the time, but it wasn't like I was sitting. Plus, I had many more partners at the time. It wasn't just me.
You divide something by 6 or 7 people, it goes pretty quick, right?
It's diluted, very, very, very quickly. And then Uncle Sam takes his bite, and then at the end of the day, you're happy, but it's nowhere near as amazing as people think it is.
So I want to get back to your thoughts. Now you got a $40 million business, you built it all the way back, all that kind of stuff. I want to get back to your kind of mentally, your thought process before you sold. But before that, you got your MBA. Now you're putting it into practice, and you're practicing that for 15 years. Is it, if I understand it correctly, have you taken that MBA in a box and the knowledge you have, and that's what you're helping in your current life today, post transaction? Is it all of those 20 years of learnings what you're helping other entrepreneurs with now?
Yeah, so another big piece of learnings came in the form of surrounding myself with advisors. I was really, really big on getting advice from others in a similar boat. So I'm sorry.
Advisors that are outside the company.
Yeah, advisors outside the company. So I'm the first to admit that I don't know everything. I think I'm smart, but I've made a ton of mistakes. I've done a lot of things right, done a lot of things wrong. And I wanted to make sure that the right to wrong ratio was going in this direction. So I'm like, let's surround myself with smart people. So I first joined an organization called the Inc. CEO Project. And this is basically a peer advisory group. So basically, you're surrounded by an advisory group of other CEOs led by an executive coach of similarly sized companies. And you meet once a quarter, almost as it was almost like a board meeting. You come to the table with financials, with your projections, and every CEO gets to present a business challenge that's in front of them right now. And you get advice on that, from the executive coach as well as from other CEOs. And you go around the table for 2 days doing this.
Do you have to be an Inc. 500, Inc. 5000 CEO to qualify for that group?
You do not. That's not a requirement.
Okay.
But we were an Inc. 5000 company for 7 years in a row. So we're super, super proud of that. So that was the first form of advice, and that worked out incredibly well. And I found myself enjoying, giving advice to other CEOs as much as I was benefiting, from getting their advice. So that worked out well. The second phase of advisory came from a company called Acresis, Acresis. And Acresis is a highly specialized management consulting firm. And they only focus on working with founders, founders only, founder-run businesses. And they're working with founders to help them scale and exit their business. And one of the many things that Acresis helped me with was bringing in a really experienced management team. I mean, I thought I had an incredible team, and I'm still friends with most of them. But their thesis is really around bringing in folks that have been there, done that can really help take the organization to the next level. And along with, so slowly but surely, we got to that, professional CFO that has exited multiple companies. We've gotten to that professional, sales executive that has a ton of credibility in front of private equity investors or others, professional COO, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So after, doing all of that led to the actual exit. And at post exit, I've actually joined the Acresis as an operating partner, so that I can help entrepreneurs along the same exact journey. I had such an incredible experience. I learned so much. And to me right now, it's super rewarding to work with other fellow entrepreneurs and founders to help them along the same journey.
And so when you engaged with these guys while you were running Binary Tree, and they suggested, all right, we got to go get bigger and better people. Does that mean you had to turn over some of the people you had? Did you find another place for them? Did you have to let them go? Did you have to replace them?
Combination of all. I mean, everybody. I keep in touch with almost everybody. They've all the ones that went elsewhere are doing incredibly well, and in some cases we were able to find other roles.
But I think that the thesis, though, it's so easy when you're on a podcast like this or looking back. If I said to myself, for example, I've got a $10 million business and I've got a couple of people I think are really good, but I could have access to a guy who's built a business to $40 million himself and has had all these experiences. To have access to that compared to people I'm slugging it out with every day, there really is a big difference, right?
There's a humongous difference, and out of all the things that we did, the most gut-wrenching decisions ever are the ones that involve people and people's careers. They're gut-wrenching, but at the end of the day, you have to look at your organization as the most important thing, and to do the right thing for your organization sometimes is really, really tough. I mean, the toughest thing I had to do for my organization was firing myself and bringing this as one of the management moves. Was bringing in the CEO. I got a promotion in the process. I became executive chairman, but I had to fire myself as CEO and take myself out of the day-to-day running of my baby.
And so then, how do you? So this firm, Acresis, do they help you identify the CEOs? They have a network of these guys. They've got headhunters. They've got all that stuff.
All of the above. A very, very large and super impressive network. This is a team of folks that have gone through multiple exits in their careers. The two founders, I mean, their LinkedIn profiles are the most impressive things that I've ever read. and they have a network of operating partners. I'm one of them now. So we have a network of C-level folks. We have a network of headhunting organizations that specialize in this. And so to answer your question, yes, they're the ones that helped me personally. Just using their network alone, without an exorbitant headhunter fee, helped me find a person. I brought him on as COO first. I thought it was gonna take a year for me to make a decision to promote him to CEO. It took me about 3 months. I'm like, wow, this was a great find. Love the guy. He thinks like I do, things better than I do in some cases, and worked out great.
And so I would imagine, or answer this then, when looking at it from a buyer's perspective, right, which I get to see from the inside of a transaction oftentimes. When you look at an organization, let's just take Binary Tree, with the level of talent there, do you, as the owner of that business, do you feel like you were paid for that? Do you feel like you broke even, that you brought these people in, you grew the business, and you got paid a little bit more so it compensated for all the expense of these people? Or do you feel like the multiple you got on the value of the business was dramatically more than if Steve was the CEO and you were growing it that way?
I mean, it's hard to say what could have been. Could I have gotten it to the level that I got it to without them? Maybe. I'll give myself, a little bit chance of success. I'm not going to say absolutely not. I'll say maybe. It could have been harder. Maybe it would have taken a little bit longer. So bringing in the experienced team got us to the level faster with a little bit, less headache. Because they're just going off a playbook, right? Folks that are doing it for their first time are just, figuring it out, and they're being super scrappy, which is great, and getting it done. But folks that have been there, done that, are going off a playbook, and the decision-making process is just so different.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got more than my money back on the spend.
And so when you think about when you engaged Acresis, did you say to yourself, listen, I'm going to sell this business. I want to, make it as shiny as possible. I'm going to hire these guys and that's going to lead me to a transaction in a year or two? Or what was that thought process like before you went to market?
That was definitely the game plan. It was Acresis typically we work with founders that are looking for an exit within a 2 to 4 year time frame. So that was so the decision to actually attempt to sell, not that it just to go through the process. I didn't know how it was going to end up. Was actually made 4 years prior to the transaction date.
And so now, when you bring on a new client, let's say, because you're working with people now, right? You yourself as an advisor.
Yes.
Is there something in that CEO that you see or you look for to say this guy will be successful working with us?
Sure. I mean, I'm looking for a lot of the same characteristics that I had. We're looking for people that understand that they don't know everything. We're looking for people that have a learning mentality, and we're looking for folks that understand that there's a better way to do things than the way they're doing it now. So, and they have to be fun folks to hang around with. One of the executive coach that I had at the Inc. CEO project, she said that if I can't spend 4 hours in a golf cart with somebody, I'm never going to advise them.
Yeah.
So I picked that up from her.
So you've been through now one transaction, right, before, and now as the executive chairman, you're going through another transaction. How are the two different in terms of the structure and the support and the people that you had in company in selling Binary Tree versus the earlier one that you had?
Sure. So in the first one, I mean, I was knee deep in due diligence. I mean, I was a CEO of the company. It was I knew that I was going to be part of the deal. I was going to be changing jobs. So due diligence basically, took over my day for at that time it was about 2 months, and so I was just knee deep in that. Having built out this team, fast forward to the latest transaction, having built out an executive management team with a super experienced CEO, a super experienced CFO, and a highly organized everything. I was a completely hands off. I mean, I was basically brought into some of the bigger ticket decisions in terms of or negotiations as far as some of the holdbacks. Some of the tax ramifications, some of the other, cash, related issues of the deal. But as far as a percentage of my due diligence involvement, I would say 5% at the top.
And then I would also imagine, one of the things I tell guys all the time, because in the services business, you almost always have an earnout, right? And most guys say, well, I'm not really that active in the business and I've got a good team and blah, blah, blah. And I always tell them that nobody believes that, right? Because you're still the CEO. When you're the executive chairman and they meet a CEO at that talent and experience level like you described, the notion of you taking an earnout, did that still exist or did that go away?
No, I mean, we knew from the beginning that, I mean, we came in, ready to negotiate this hard in terms of no earnout. And we were shocked that the earnout was that evil word. Again, it's not that evil, was never even brought up. I mean, from the LOI, just it was a pure cash deal.
Gotcha. And so, and then you got the business. It's prepared. It's ready with the Acresis guys. do you then hire a banking firm, and did you go far and wide? Did you get a bunch of offers? Did you go through the whole thing like that?
Yeah, one of the great value adds that Accresis did, which I'm happy to do right now, is we did an entire shopping process for an investment banking firm. So we went for us. We went out to four different firms. Gave them our story. I went to climb a mountain for a month. I came back a month later, and they were ready with their pitch for us. And literally back to back to back over 2 days, they came in and they pitched how they were going to bring binary tree to market. And from those four presentations, we selected one. We selected is it okay to say who I selected?
Sure.
Yeah, Fairmount Partners out of Pennsylvania.
Wow, very good. And anything surprise you about? And it's great to have your insight because you've done 2 transactions now. And I realized that the second company was bigger, more mature. It was all those things. Anything that you were surprised about with transaction number 2 versus number 1?
Surprised about? No real surprises. I mean, there were some things that I wish would have been done, differently. There were some things that came out of due diligence that surprised me. I thought all of our eggs were in a row. I mean, we had audited financial statements from one of the big firms. I thought there would be very, very little surprises. So I was surprised when there were some sales and use tax issues that came out during due diligence. Yeah, that would basically, so that resulted in one of the holdbacks that we're still working through. But relatively speaking, out of the entire transaction size, it wasn't that large, but it's still substantial.
Gotcha. And so this transaction closed when?
This transaction closed on September 1st at 11:42 a.m.
Of 2021.
21.
So still in the midst of COVID.
No, I'm sorry. 20.
Of 2020.
Of 20.
So September 2020 is still, gosh, maybe even more the middle of COVID. Did that have an impact on any of your decision making or the deal process or anything like that?
No, we were actually really concerned because we actually we started the marketing process. The investment banking firm started the marketing process in the heat of COVID, right, in March of that year. And our biggest concern was our numbers. You never want to sell your company when the numbers are going in the wrong direction. Touch wood, touch everything. Our numbers continued going in the right direction, through the heat of it.
That's great. Hey, so I want to wrap up with just a couple of quick questions. But first, let's recognize a couple of folks. Sounds like the Inc. project, the Inc. CEO project, was super helpful to you. You mentioned your coach. What's her name?
Pam Singleton.
Pam Singleton. So shout out to her. Do you want to mention your partners or the founders of Accresis now?
Sure. Bill Thomas and Mark Hodges.
Okay.
Mark Hodges is out of the U.S., spends his time between Texas and California, and Bill Thomas is out of the U.K. So we, as a firm, we service customers across the pond. Excellent.
Anybody listening, the show notes on the secondbitepodcast.com has all Steve's contact information and the website and everything else. But if somebody wanted to reach out to you, Steve, to connect, what would be the best way to do that?
LinkedIn is the best way to find me. So you can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm very active on there and responsive.
Great. And last name, Pivnik.
Yes. So
here's my last question, Steve. So you have been, and we've known each other now for a bunch of years through LinkedIn, I think is how we met initially. But I know, as we've chronicled here, you've been very successful from a business perspective, also very successful in your family life, community life, all that as well. Is there something that you could point to, either an early lesson, a book that you read, a mentor that you had, that you would credit a lot with your success and your learning?
Sure. I mean, I read and listen to a ton of books. I think from a book perspective, if I had to pick one and only one, it's actually called The One Thing. So The One Thing, it's a book on productivity. And I think the tagline is, if you can do one thing so that everything else would be either a lot easier or unnecessary, what would it be? And you could apply that to a lot of things, to your relationships, to your faith, to your professional life, to various projects, and a lot of things, a lot of people, like the owner of the Inc. CEO project, Jim Flesher, he calls it like, peanut butter. Everybody, spreads their time just like peanut butter across so many different initiatives. So one of my favorite books, and I've reread it, multiple times.
And is Jim the one that introduced it? So Jim's right here, just outside of DC, right? He's
yes. So Jim Flesher is the founder of Inc. CEO project, and Pam Singleton is one of several, Inc. CEO project coaches.
Yep. And so he's the one that turned you on to the one thing.
I just use his peanut butter analogy. I mean, he personally he also has a great book, to give him a shout out, called Great CEOs Are Lazy. But it's very, very similar. Meaning, if you're a CEO, you should be lazy. You should be spending your time on one thing, or that's really, 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 really important, and then move on to the next thing, instead of spreading your time like peanut butter across multiple
That's
initiatives.
great. And I'll tell you what I'll do is, because Jim and I know each other, and I'm going to reach out to Jim after this, tell him that you were on, but I'm going to get him on a future edition or episode of the podcast, because he's been doing that for 20 years, working with Inc. 500, Inc. 5000 CEOs. He's just a treasure trove of knowledge and experience and information. So I'm going to make sure that we get him on. So the one thing is the book. Anything else that was important or impactful for you?
Just a shout out to the CEO of the company of Net Aspects, John Whiteside. I mean, he was, I guess, the main professor of my MBA in a box.
Yes.
And
it's John Whiteside?
John Whiteside. I don't think he's active anymore. I think he's retired, because I can't find him. I've tried. I can't find him anywhere. I think he literally bought a farm and went off the grid, I think. Huh. John, if you're out there and I'm wrong, please find me.
Yes, find Steve. Steve, it's great when it's, first of all, it's always generous when people share their time. It's, I think, even more valuable when somebody's generous and has a lifetime of business experience like you've had and have shared it. I know for people that are listening that aren't sure if you would be a good client for Steve or vice versa. Correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but I'm guessing you'll probably be willing to spend 15 or 20 minutes talking to just about anyone that's a CEO, founder of a business, to figure out if you could be helpful or not.
Happy to spend my time talking to fellow entrepreneurs. I greatly enjoy that.
Excellent. Well, Steve, this has been a great episode. I really do appreciate you being a guest and being on. So thank you for that. Number one, thanks for our people to our sponsors at Trivest, and it was a great episode, Steve. So thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Second Bite podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.